Now, competition law solves market failures occasioned by monopolies. Competition law doesn't solve or isn't designed to solve market failure caused by negative externalities. So to think that this is strictly a competition problem and that by changing the competition rules, this will somehow develop a magic solution to the crisis is completely incorrect.
En el episodio de hoy, nuestro invitado nos ofrecerá desde la perspectiva del Reino Unido el papel del derecho de la competencia frente a desafíos globales, como lo son el cambio climático, la pandemia y la transición energética. También exploraremos la construcción de un derecho a la energía, su impacto en la creación de subsidios y apoyos estatales para los ciudadanos y cómo esto podría influir en la regulación del sector energético y en la implementación de políticas sociales para entender estas necesidades. Bienvenidos.
Del Carbono al Watt, un podcast del Departamento de Derecho Minero Energético de la Universidad Externado de Colombia, dedicado a informar, aportar y discutir la transición y la justicia energética en Colombia y el mundo.
Acompáñenos de la mano de nuestros invitados a aclarar ideas, conceptos y discusiones sobre el futuro de la minería, el petróleo, la energía y su relación con la transición y la justicia energética.
Soy Juan Felipe Neira.
Soy Luis Bustos. Gracias por ser parte de la cuarta temporada de Del Carbono al Watt.
Traiga su libreta y comencemos.
Bruce Wardhaugh is a professor of competition law at Durham Law School in the UK. He earned a PhD and an LLB from the University of Toronto and an LLM from the University of Amsterdam. Prior to his career as a legal academic, Bruce practiced in Canada for a number of years. His research has primarily focused on competition issues related to collusion, with notable publications on competition law in crisis, the antitrust response to economic shocks, and competition effects and predictability.
Professor Bruce, in 2022 you published a paper named Competition Law in Crisis, the Antitrust Response to Economic Shocks. In that sense, can you explain to the audience the link that the competition law has with climate change and energy transition? And can you tell us if competition law can provide a solution to the challenges on these two important topics?
Yes, I can, actually. My book originally started out with the idea of looking at competition's response to environmental concerns. As I recall, then in the initial stage sort of planning the book, and then meeting with a representative from Cambridge University Press and said, hey, I've got this idea for a book on sustainability, the environment, and climate change, and its relation to competition law. This was in this is right at the beginning of March 2020 when I approached that. And the CUP representative was very, very interested in it and asked me to go ahead. But in March 2020, things changed. And so with COVID, of course, so I decided to take a wider perspective and look at how competition law reacts with in the face of various crises. Now, the typical competition law or typical sort of response or public sentiment is that somehow competition law gets in the way of resolving these crises and problems. We see this time and time again. We see this with in the financial crisis. We saw this with industrial crises. We also saw this in COVID. One of the immediate outcries from industry was, whoa, let's relax competition law. We can solve the problems if you'll just let us talk to each other, if you'll let us arrange things. And we also see this in the environmental crisis, is that somehow competition law gets in the way of industry-wide solutions to problems. The argument in my book is, well, this isn't really the case. Quite often, these calls for relaxation of competition standards are, in effect, to crisis wash an otherwise uncompetitive arrangement. During the COVID time we saw, at least in the UK, with the grocery industry. Hey, let us talk to each other. We can talk about ensuring that there's a proper supply of food and toilet paper in various parts of the country. In effect, it appeared to be nothing more than a form of or an attempt at a disguised cartel to raise prices to somehow harm consumers. There's of course bad collaboration or collusion among firms, and crises can often be used to crisis wash such collaboration. The good collaboration exists, and competition law doesn't prevent that. Again, in COVID, look at good collaboration. All of the Western, and by Western I mean not Chinese or Russian vaccines, with the exception of the Johnson & Johnson product, were developed by collaboration from various pharmaceutical companies, and this was done within the context of the existing competition law. Now, as a result, we had a number of very, very effective vaccines developed and offered to the public in record time. In environment, we're seeing the same things. Let us relax things. Let us collude under the name of somehow promoting environmental standards or promoting environmentally good ends. But this collaboration, or so-called collaboration, I call it collusion to distinguish it from, is merely to greenwash an otherwise anti-competitive cartel. You can quite often achieve the same results without having to collude. I mean, as in COVID, as in other crises, there's the bad form of collusion, and then there's the good form of cooperation. We can develop industry-wide standards over over labeling, industry-wide standards over production methods.
But what you will say to the voices that states that in time of crisis you need a different approximation?
No, I think my approach in the book is, some people would call it fairly conservative. I don't think we need a radical rewriting of the competition rules to somehow adapt competition to these various crises. What we need is clarity in the competition rules, but more importantly, we need the competition authorities to, in addition to enforcing the rules, to assist industry stakeholders in ensuring that the stakeholders can easily abide by the rules, so that there's clarity in what will happen. And there's clarity that the industry can come up with a proposed arrangement and say, is this legal under your rules? And to get some sort of, I would say, binding commitment from the competition authorities. In Europe, that hadn't happened. In Europe, the competition authorities stayed away from making such commitments. But we saw in COVID a sense that, well, maybe we should help out, and the introduction and the greater use of comfort letters to industries was appropriate. And this is the sort of argument, or the sort of way that the new competition or the new enforcement approach to competition should go.
At the end, it will be good to take a look of the COVID experience and what we do in order to have this type of approach over the experience that we got there to the climate change, right? Yes. To the climate change barriers and the climate change challenges that we got, right?
Yeah, and one thing we have to remember, I approach things through the lens of a competition lawyer, but competition law is not the solution to all of these problems, or relaxing competition.
That's tough. Yeah.
I mean, look at COVID. That was a public health crisis, among other things, an economic crisis, so on and so forth. Environmental problems, we have, that's an instance of negative externalities. That's an instance of public goods. Now, competition law solves market failures occasioned by monopolies. Competition law doesn't solve or isn't designed to solve market failure caused by negative externalities. So to think that this is strictly a competition problem and that by changing the competition rules, this will somehow develop a magic solution to the crisis is completely incorrect.
Okay. Professor Bruce, let me change the subject. Several countries have been suffering a crisis due to high energy cost,
Yes.
which is very important to be able to deliver heating or air conditioning services to certain regions. And it's more important when we talk about hospitals or nursing homes or geriatric centers in winter times, right?
Exactly, exactly.
You will know this. So what is your opinion regarding the intervention that the state should make by providing like state aids and subsidies to those populations that cannot pay the high cost of energy?
Okay. I think we need to be careful about our terms here. Okay, state aid is typically aid granted to companies to allow them to develop a product. Subsidies are a form of state aid, but subsidies can also be directed towards consumers. I see no reason why we can't subsidize in times of crisis essentials. Energy is one, water, perhaps food, and food certainly are other things. But the idea is that these subsidies should be appropriately targeted. And
Transport, of course.
and that relies on energy. But let me explain how, at least in my mind, this should operate. I mean, as a competition lawyer, as I just said a minute or two ago, I see the purpose of competition law is to address the problems faced with the market failure due to monopoly. In a perfectly competitive market, if we can address that market failure, hopefully this will ensure that society as a whole will become wealthier. Now that we have a wealthier society, I think it's probably appropriate to ask ourselves, what can we do with this increased wealth? And it's here that a non-competition aspect of social policy can get involved. And that non-competition aspect may well take the form of a tax and transfer regime. Well, we do it all at some degree. We need a certain amount of taxes to pay for public goods. The obvious ones are, national defense. The traditional ones are lighthouses. And there's no reason why in a kind society that we look after to some degree or to a great degree those who are less fortunate. And I think we can appropriately target that. The problem with a lot of subsidies, at least from my experience, and maybe it's my cynicism here that's appropriate, is a lot of subsidies are used not really to alleviate a problem, but are used by the political class as a means of ingratiating themselves to certain sets of the public for, call it what it is, vote buying.
That's it. Thank you for your honesty there. Thank you.
And I think that's something that we need to avoid, because looking after the less fortunate, looking after those that need it is significantly different from buying the vote of a certain constituency.
No, and of course all the link that it got with democracy and how we can affect it. Let's go deeper in that. What will be your opinion regarding the statement that each citizen should have the right to a minimum energy consumption, right? Or that the state will guarantee that minimum energy that each citizen had the right to?
Yeah, that's an issue that I haven't thought a great deal of, but upon sort of immediate reflection, given the need for energy, and it's for things such as electricity to keep one warm in winter, to refrigerate one's perishable foods. it's tied very much to the absolutely basic needs. Clearly, it ties into citizens, to people's ability to use the internet, which of course is becoming much more important as everybody shifts to online delivery, whether that be online delivery of education, as we saw in COVID, or online delivery of government services, which is an essential element of any participatory democracy. So ensuring that people have a minimum degree of access to energy or to affordable energy is minimum for ensuring a minimum standard of living and buttressing a democratic community.
And then we land once again at the democracy issue, right?
Democracy and political issue and also market
participation, right?
Yeah, participation in a democracy. But as a competition lawyer who likes market participation in the markets, it gives you the information so that you can maybe have the ability to know where to buy goods cheaper by doing a little bit of online price comparison. So I think it's appropriate. But again, this goes back to, I think, the last question, and that being the sort of subsidies or what have you ought to be directed as precisely and appropriately as possible.
Professor Bruce, let's go back to competition law. How do you see that international trade law is adapting to these challenges that is presented by the energy transition and climate change?
Well, I have done a fair amount of work in WTO law, and unfortunately, it hasn't adapted that well. The WTO regime as we know it is unfortunately dead.
Why you say that?
Well,
why you state that?
Why do I state that? The Americans have killed it. With Trump's refusal to appoint members to the appellate body has essentially rendered that body unable to function. So that means that first instance panel hearings can go ahead, but the losing party inevitably appeals it, staying any sort of measures, and of course that no appellate body can take on. So essentially, it's removed the stick from the system. Yeah, and the other problem is that there's a significant trade war or elements of a trade dispute getting to be a trade war, particularly with renewable energy or components used in the production of renewable energy, wind turbine parts, solar panels and such. China has, let's say, speaking neutrally, has taken a lead in the global production of that. There's some convincing allegations that this was done with a strong degree of government subsidies, and there is claims in the U.S. from the U.S. and in Europe that these subsidies are in fact harming industries. As a competition lawyer, I like the idea of goods being dumped. That means that, of course, consumers get goods cheaper. But, of course, foreign goods being dumped on your market is not good news for the domestic producers of competing goods. Plus, it adds a bit of a security, production line security issues, that if all of a sudden the supply line of goods upon which a country or country's industry has depended suddenly vanished, that it will again destroy it. And this can be significant when we're talking about energy concerns. So, I think right now we have a significant significant problems with the way the international trade regulatory regime is handling environmental issues and products that can be used in the resolution of the environmental problems.
Thank you, Professor Bruce, for being here at the Carbono al Watt at the Department of Mining and Energy Law of the Externado University. Hope it's not the last time that we have this collaboration with Durham University. Thanks. Y para que lo apunte en su libreta,
el recomendado de nuestro invitado es...
Okay, a recommendation. I would strongly, and I'd be remiss in not recommending it, strongly recommend you to come to Durham, whether as a student or as a visitor. If you come as a student, you'll be studying in one of the world's top universities in a beautiful, quintessentially English town. As a visitor, it's a spectacular UNESCO World Heritage Site with a lovely cathedral and almost every element of Harry Potter that you can imagine.
Aquí termina Del Carbono al Watt.
Síguenos en Spreaker, Spotify y en la página de Podcast o Externado.
También disponible en las redes del Departamento de Derecho, Minero, Energético de la Universidad Externado de Colombia. Del Carbono al Watt es un podcast original del Departamento de Derecho, Minero, Energético de la Universidad Externado de Colombia.
Producción general, Luis Bustos y Juan Felipe Neira.
Productor técnico, Ancísar Aponte y la Facultad de Comunicación Social de la Universidad Externado de Colombia.
Musicalización, Pixabay. Gracias por seguirnos.